Imagine a world where the cannabis plant is no longer classified alongside heroin and LSD, but instead is seen more closely to Tylenol with codeine. What would that do for medical research and for citizens' rights in the United States? And then also, what if right here in Florida, a single ballot amendment could change everything we know about marijuana laws right here in the Sunshine State? Well, in today's episode, we're going to deep dive into the federal push to reschedule cannabis, and we're going to talk a little bit about Amendment 3, which could reshape all the marijuana laws right here in Florida. So stay tuned, because you're definitely not going to want to miss this discussion. So let's talk DEA scheduling. So for those of us who don't know what that is, DEA scheduling is the drug scheduling system by the US government. And what it does is it measures the potential for abuse, for its medicinal uses, and for its safety for all drugs. All right, so there's 5 different schedules. Now, 1 is the most restrictive schedule, and Schedule 5 is the least restrictive. And what is being discussed right now in the federal government is moving marijuana from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3. So here's what the schedules kind of look like between the two. So Schedule 1 has a high potential for abuse with no accepted medicinal uses, and it's alongside heroin, LSD, ecstasy, and yes, marijuana is currently classified in this category. Someone clearly did not do the research from an archaeological standpoint or a medicinal standpoint before they did this, but I digress. That's just the state we're in now. However, it's being in the process of reclassified to Schedule 3. Now, this is a lower potential for abuse. It does have recognized accepted medicinal uses, and it's along the lines of anabolic steroids, ketamine, low doses of codeine, and benzodiazepines. And so when this happens, cannabis would be moved from Schedule 1 to Schedule 3, which would make it more accessible to more people. All right, so what's the impact of rescheduling cannabis? Well, it really has 3 main categories that it will influence quite a bit. It's going to be from a legal standpoint, from a medicinal standpoint, and also from an economic landscape. So let's talk about what those might look like. So first, legally. So this could reduce the legal restrictions and penalties associated with having marijuana on hand. Also, the federal regulations and criminal justice system will definitely have to make adjustments should this go to Schedule 3. And then it could lift drug testing for certain types of industries or employment, or all employment altogether. We don't know how that's going to happen yet, but once it's all shakes out, the DEA is going to be making those adjustments. And then we're talking about medicinally. So marijuana would be much more recognized as an accepted medicinal plant, which it should already be. But because of the restrictions on studies, doctors can't really latch on to this and advocate that as much as some of them may like to. It would allow for more extensive clinical research, because that is the big problem, is there's just so many restrictions, it's not happening very much. This could really solve a lot of that. And then it could possibly allow insurance companies to cover it as a medication, because it could be prescribed from a doctor. So there's a lot of really good upsides here. And then economically, what would it do? It could possibly open up new business opportunities for new businesses. And then also it would have more favorable tax treatment, because right now with the federal restrictions, any states that do have medical programs like Florida here, or some of those rec states, the tax structure is much different because of the federal restrictions. This would definitely ease that and help things be a bit more legitimate across those businesses. Now let's talk the Florida Ballot Amendment 3. So in November, Floridians are going to have the opportunity to vote on Amendment 3. And what that states is people 21 and over will be able to purchase cannabis in the state of Florida. That all sounds great to a lot of people, right? However, there's a lot of things we need to clarify. So supporters will claim that the amendment kind of frees the plant here in Florida. That's not entirely true. So there are many restrictions in this bill, including not decriminalizing cannabis. So I just want to be clear, this does not decriminalize cannabis in the state of Florida. And there will be limits on the amount of products you can purchase. So it's another restriction. So first, before we get into the overall impact that could happen, I just want to encourage everyone out there to read the bill, okay? Because what happened is that the current a bill that was passed for the medical program, that was amended. That was just amended, and there was additions to it to make it adult use. And I just encourage everyone to read that, because there's some things in there that may surprise you. And just to give you a couple of highlights that are in that bill. So obviously I just said there's product limits. There's no home grow involved. There's going to be an excise tax. They didn't say what that is in the bill, but if it follows suit to any of the other states out there, we're talking 25 to 40% tax on all your products. So essentially, Floridians will pay more to get less. Then we need to talk a little bit about vertical integration, because that did not change in the bill whatsoever. You might be thinking, what the heck is vertical integration? Allow me to explain. So what vertical integration is how cannabis dispensaries are required to operate here in the state of Florida, and that will be including the Amendment 3. And the way that works is every dispensary has to own the grow facility, the packaging and processing facility, and the dispensary itself. What that allows is the state to lab test all products, and you can go to any dispensary and request a certificate of analysis on any product, which is nice for safety. However, it can limit the amount of grow operations here in the state of Florida. And if you look at where we're at today, right? So right now in the program, there's a little less than 1 million patients. I would say there's just over 900,000 patients in the state of Florida. And currently right now, with that number of patients, dispensaries can barely keep up with that supply and demand. And many patients know what it's like to go to your favorite dispensary, get the strain that's really working well for you. We just happen to be out today. Would you settle for something different? Right? That happens to many of us. And it's because there's only a certain number of licenses allowed in the state of Florida. So there only can be a certain number of grows. And the idea is that they're kind of barely keeping up with the medical program. Well, imagine if they start opening the floodgates to anyone 21 and over. We're going from 900,000 patients roughly to, in the state of Florida, there's over 23, 24 million people. How many of them are over 21? And not to mention all the tourism we get. That will significantly impact the supply chain. What it'll end up doing likely is drying up that supply chain, and then patients and rec users won't be able to get anything until they replenish supply. And the last thing that I want to see is patients not be able to get products, because the bill does not distinguish between medicinal patients or rec users. That just isn't fair for someone suffering from a debilitating condition to not be able to get products, where someone that's a rec user, maybe from out of state or from wherever, they can get as much as they want or up until the limits, but then they can't keep up with the supply, then nobody gets anything. So this is something to really consider. That could be a possibility. Not to mention, it could just open the floodgates for these big dispensaries to come in and buy up these smaller dispensaries. And then we're going to have very limited places that we can purchase, because all the big guys are going to buy them all up. So again, these are all possibilities that could happen, but I just would encourage everyone to read the bill so you better understand what you're voting for, because what's being propagated through the pro Amendment 3 people is not necessarily 100% true. And I definitely encourage you to read between the lines. So just to kind of wrap up here, moving cannabis to Schedule 3 is long overdue. We've been using cannabis, mankind has been using cannabis medicinally for centuries. That's been documented in many, many places. It could absolutely inspire more clinical trials where more doctors could really gravitate towards this as a medicinal intervention. And then, the other thing that I would really look forward to is let's remove the stigmas. I think this being considered as a true medicinal intervention could significantly remove the stigmas involved with this. And we can normalize this as something that could really help people and not just this fun drug. And then Amendment 3, let's talk a little bit about that. So, that could be detrimental to the supply chain right here in Florida. You're going to pay more to get less. It doesn't necessarily decriminalize cannabis. And I just want to be clear, I am not against recreational. That is not something I'm necessarily against, but it needs to be done in the right way. It needs to be done in a way that doesn't hurt patients, prioritizes our patients, and then still being able to supply the rec users who want to get it. There is a happy medium that can be reached, but it has to be done the right way. And the way the current bill is written, it does not lend itself to that. So I just want to encourage everyone to check that out. Right here on the My Florida Green podcast, we always seek to educate, because we want to build a community, because, and let me tell you, when we build a strong, bigger community, we learn from each other. So I want to open up a question to all of you. Tell us in the comments. I really want to know, what are your thoughts on Schedule 3 and Amendment 3? See you next time.